This might be old news to all you dive watch lovers, but this is the first time I ever noticed that when you put the watches in the water, it creates this really cool mirror-like reflection at certain angles. I've worn my watches in the water before. I guess I just never paid attention that this happens, or maybe it's just the lighting in the pool. So this will most likely be my longest video so far, and I'll make sure that I include chapters down below so you can skip to the parts that you're interested in. And I know not everybody has 20-30 minutes to watch a video. However, on the same page, when I'm going to spend $4,000 to $5,000 on a watch, I'm willing to spend 20-30 minutes to make sure I make the right choice. So in the name of science, I wore both watches for about 2 weeks, one on each wrist, and I would alternate them throughout the day just to see which one I liked more. I used the bracelets, the rubber bands, and combinations of the two, so I'll let you know my findings. So the reason I'm starting this comparison on different straps, rubber on the Omega and the stainless steel on the Breitling, is because this is how I feel that each watch really shines. I think the Seamaster really shines on this rubber strap, and the Breitling really shines on the stainless steel bracelet. At least that's how I prefer each of the watches. As far as wearability is concerned, the Omega is a lot lighter. It weighs in at 110 grams on the rubber strap and 184 grams on the bracelet, where the Breitling weighs 220 grams on the bracelet and 140 grams on rubber. So it is pretty heavy, but it's also a 44 millimeter on a 22 mil band, where the Omega is a 42 millimeter watch on a 20 mil band that does not taper for the stainless steel. And the rubber strap does taper, which really makes it a lot more seamless to me. To me, both watches are extremely comfortable in both configurations. Obviously, rubber is going to be more lightweight than steel in any case, but I've never had a problem with the bracelet on this. It doesn't pinch my hair. It feels well balanced, well made, and the same goes for the Omega. The Breitling is a little harder to dress up. I have worn it in a suit before. That's just because I have no sense of style apparently. But it's definitely a more playful watch, more of a tool watch, very legible, very hefty. Where the Omega, you could dress it up on the bracelet a little easier. It's not a dress watch, but right now on the rubber strap, you could definitely wear it anywhere, to the gym in shorts, something a little more casual, to dinner. I think it checks off all the boxes as far as a high-low watch. So round one definitely goes to the Seamaster. It's more comfortable to wear because it's smaller, even though I like big watches, and it's more versatile to where you can wear it. Next, we'll compare the overall finishing and aesthetics of both the watches, and I'll start with the dials of the watch. The Breitling features a blue sunburst dial. I'm not sure what material the dial is made of. I'm assuming it's aluminum, anodized aluminum, but it does look really nice. It gets really deep, really dark, and then in this light, it's pretty light blue, and just the sunburst effect is always really nice. The polished hands probably are the blingiest part of the watch, and that's really what shines in the light play. Now the Seamaster features a ceramic dial, which is highly reflective. The sapphire has an anti-reflective coating on it, and that's not what you really see attract the light. The dial itself is what's highly reflective. You can see where the sapphire is kind of reflecting, and when it's actually the dial will act like a mirror. It honestly looks a lot better in person. Here you can see the hands again. The hands on the Breitling really shine well. The hands on the Omega are supposed to be polished steel, but they look black to me. There's nothing wrong with them. They're skeletonized. They look really nice to contrast with the black and the white. They're just not as blingy as the Breitling, if that's something you're into. So now the case lines on the Breitling are a little more simple, more masculine maybe, less refined. And you can see the Omega has these extra little refinements, which I think really do push it over the edge. Just a nice subtle touch, not too much. The scalloped bezel looks a lot dressier than the coin style bezel. But the coin style bezel is easier to grip. As far as the case backs go, the Seamaster does feature the sapphire case back, which is not very common on a dive watch. Now besides the hands on the Breitling being more blingy, they are just more legible altogether, easier to tell what time it is without a doubt, especially when they're overlapping in low light. The case back is a clear win for the Omega, especially for a dive watch. A very nice in-house movement to be shown. And there you can see the black ceramic hairspring. The Breitling is very well finished too, especially for a watch with 1,000-meter water resistance. They didn't cut any corners on the back. Very nice, very detailed, and very hefty. Both feature a date window. The Omega has it at the 6 o'clock position, which I personally like more. It adds to the symmetry of the watch. And the Breitling has it in the 3 o'clock position, which I guess it is what it is, it's there. I think it would be cooler if it was down at the 6 o'clock position and if we had the number 3. Or just no date altogether, honestly. The watch is already busy enough. I do like that both date wheels at least match, or they go with the color scheme of the watch. I hate when you have, let's say, a green watch and a white date wheel, or a blue watch with a white date wheel. In this case, I'm okay with the white date wheel on the Breitling because it features the white Arabic numerals. And on the Seamaster, the black and white goes with the rest of the look of the watch. I think it's very clean. The Omega has a brushed logo, and the Breitling still has the 24 karat applied logo. The logo also adds to the light play on the Breitling, very nice. And honestly, I like the applied logos more than the painted on ones. I believe Omega did away with the applied logo on this Seamaster for function over aesthetic purposes, but it'd still be nice if at this price point it had an applied logo in a precious metal. And finally, for the finishing, I think the fact that Breitling has the screw down bezels is a huge plus for me. It's just an extra bit of engineering that they add to ensure that your watch is a little more bulletproof. So Breitling's bezels have all these tiny little screws around so that you can't accidentally pop the bezel if you were to bang it on something. I've never popped the bezel on any watch, but I guess bezels just come off with enough force. The Breitling bezels, you need a little screwdriver. If you want to get the bezel off, you don't just pop it off. The Seamaster does not have these screws, but like I said, I've never popped the bezel off on accident anyway. Hopefully it never happens. The Omega has the scalloped edge instead of the coin style edge. That's objective, which one you like more. I'll show you a trick on how to use the Omega easier in the next section. Here's a few clips of how each watch light plays in different lightings, and you can make up your own decision whether you prefer the sunburst dial or the ceramic dial. Even though I know I'm in love with the ceramic dial and all the reflections that it creates, I am going to give a extra nod to the Breitling for the anti-reflective coating. The AR coating on the Breitling has a little bit of the blue tint to it and seems a little more aggressive. It makes the lights look smaller on the watch, or on the crystal more so, and it makes the reflections less apparent. Just speaking of the crystal, not the dial. You see the crystal here doesn't have that blue tint, and when there is a reflection on the crystal itself, it's a little more apparent. So that's another plus for the Breitling. It really does look like you could just reach in and grab the hands on the watch under certain lighting conditions. The next category we'll be discussing is overall readability, and we'll start this section off with the Lume. Right off the bat, the Omega is a little brighter, and that is true throughout the night, or even for a couple of hours. But for more day-to-day use and my actual experiences, I find the Breitling a lot more legible in dark rooms. Now this is, I don't know, maybe I go to the bathroom and the lights are off, or I go into a darker room at work. For the bulk of real-world experience, I found the Breitling more usable, but the Omega does last a lot longer. One time I woke up and looked at my nightstand and saw that I could still tell kind of what time it was on the Omega. The problem with the Lume on the Omega to me is it's hard to see where the skeletonized hands are pointing. You see here the minute hand is actually in green. So it's been about 15 minutes since I shined them both with the flashlight. Even though the Arabic numerals on the Breitling are harder to read, the hands are unmistakable. Where the hands on the Omega are a little easier to lose since they're skeletonized. Honestly, the only reason I'm looking at my watch in a dark room is to look at the Lume. I probably already know what time it is. Next is a chapter ring, or the absence of the chapter ring. I didn't notice before I bought the Omega that it does not feature a chapter ring. I kind of just thought all watches did. So here on the Breitling, you have the seconds or minutes on the inside chapter ring, and then you also have the 24-hour dial, which is really neat when you're traveling to other countries that use it a lot more. Very easy to tell the time in both 24-hour scale and 12-hour on the Breitling. Now the Omega just has the indents. It's not difficult to tell, but if you're dumb like me, at a glance, it's definitely a lot easier to tell what time it is on the Breitling. There is no chapter ring, which I found a little disappointing, but at least the bezel on the Omega has the minute markers all the way through, where the Breitling only has the single minutes up until the 15-minute mark, and then it's just the 30 and the 45. The Omega has 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and every minute in between. And now the bezel usability. This coin style bezel is very easy to grip, very easy to turn, whatever way you try to do it. I would imagine under diving circumstances it'd be just as easy to turn with gloves, wet. I can't see any problem with it. No play back and forth. Not that I think that really matters, I never push my watch backwards. And it is a 120 click bezel. So each click is 30 seconds. Now for the Omega, for a while, honestly I was thinking that the bezel was pretty dumb. I couldn't get it to work, but I'll teach you the trick. Don't rotate your whole hand. Just shuffle your fingers. Find the point on the watch and shuffle your fingers. This is definitely a lot harder with jeweler's gloves on, but trust me, once you learn this little shuffling technique, the bezel becomes a whole lot more usable. It's also 120 click. Very similar in feel as far as I'm concerned. See, it works a lot better like that. If you try moving your whole hand around the bezel, it is quite slippery. Next we'll go over some of the stats. The Breitling is powered by Breitling's Caliber 17, which is an ETA based 2824-2. It features a 4 Hz movement of 28,800 beats per hour, and it's a 25 joule watch, or 25 joule movement if you will. The Omega is powered by their Caliber 8800. It's completely in-house. It's a 3.5 Hz movement, so 25,200 beats per hour, and it's a 35 joule watch. The power reserve on the Omega is 55 hours, and on the Breitling is 42 hours. So far I have not had the Omega die on me as far as power reserve goes, but both of them is plenty. Before buying the Omega, I had concerns that I would be able to tell that it's a 7 beat per second watch instead of the 8 beats per second, but honestly having them side by side, they both look equally as smooth on the second hand sweep. I'm sure the fact that it's a 42 and not a 44 helps, because the larger the watch, the more apparent the ticking is, rather than a smooth sweep. This is why my wife's tiny Longines looks like a very smooth sweep, even though it's only a 3 Hz movement, 6 beats per second, or 21,600 beats per hour. The Breitling is COSC certified, so that means it's allowed to lose up to 4 seconds a day and gain up to 6 seconds. It's a -4 +6 tolerance on COSC certifications. And the Omega is a master chronometer grade, so that's certified by Metas, and that means they're not allowed to lose anything per day. It's a 0 to +5 second per day movement. Now I track both of them on my Atomic Watch Accuracy app, and they're both running about 3 seconds per day fast, so they're both well within spec and very comparable. Here's a screenshot of the Atomic Watch and Accuracy Meter app. You can see the Seamaster and SuperOcean are both 3 seconds per day, and a couple of my other watches are doing fine as well. So the Omega movement is typically seen as the better movement of the two. mostly because it's in-house, but to me the only reason it's really better is because of its anti-magnetic properties. But before we get onto that, the ETA-based movement should be cheaper to service if you know your own watchsmith. I believe it's $500 to have a service done through Breitling, and they recommend it done every 5 years. Whereas the Omega I've heard is $800 to service, and they recommend doing it every 8 years. I believe the fact that it beats a little bit slower adds to the extended service interval on the Omega. So if you send each of these watches out to their manufacturers, it's about $100 per year in maintenance in the long run, assuming they don't up their prices. But like I said, you should be able to service the ETA movement a lot cheaper if you find your own watchsmith. I briefly mentioned why I think the Omega's movement is superior, and that's because of its 15,000 Gauss anti-magnetic rating. I actually had the SuperOcean get magnetized on me, and it started running about 25 seconds per day quick. I demagnetized that at home, and I also put up a video on how I did that. So if you work around big electrical motors like I do, that's definitely something to think about. The Seamaster features a 300 meter water resistance, while the SuperOcean has a 1000 meter water resistance. 1000 is definitely overkill, but I don't know how they account for the pressures of you jumping in the water, diving, acting a little crazy, versus just going into a pool nicely. So it's definitely nice to have that extra water resistance rating on the Breitling. I feel a lot more confident jumping into a pool or jumping off a boat into the lake than I do with the Omega. And while I'm on the topic of movements, the date change on both of them changes within 5 minutes to midnight, which is still nothing compared to the in-house Breitling B01. That one changes at midnight, honestly within 5 seconds of 12 a.m., sorry. The bracelets. Honestly, to me, as far as comfort goes, it's a tie. I know people like to complain about the non-tapered 20 millimeter here on the Omega, but I guess I'm just used to bigger watches anyway, so the 20 millimeter untapered doesn't really faze me. Very comfortable. They articulate nicely, both of them. None of them pinch your hair. Just completely different designs altogether. Again, I think on the bracelet, the Omega does a pretty good job filling the shoes for a little higher end, more sophisticated look. And the Breitling, as always, is kind of more fun, playful, and a tool watch at the same time, and it does a really good job at all three of those. The folding mechanism on both watches feel very robust and nicely made. I'm not sure whether or not they're stamped or forged, and honestly I'm not sure if that part of the watch is made in Switzerland. Neither of them say Swiss made. Something that I found interesting is the Omega bracelet does not bend backwards. This doesn't affect daily wearability at all. It's just something that caught my eye. I really enjoy the clasp on this watch. It's just so big and well made. It really commands attention, even though it's on the inside of your wrist. Here's the watch on a 7.25 inch wrist. I think very well balanced. Feels very comfortable. The clasp does a good job at offsetting the weight. One of my favorite features on any watch band is a quick adjust. And that's because it gets very hot and humid here in the summer and very cold and dry in the winters. It really adds versatility to the watch, which makes it more likely to be worn. The Breitling, on the other hand, does articulate in both directions all the way, and for being such a large watch, it feels very comfortable. It tapers nicely, very subtle. It goes from 22 millimeters to 20 millimeters at the buckle. The buckle is stamped metal, so some people complain that it feels cheap, but it does its job, and it does its job very well. Once it's on, it feels very secure. I've never had any problems with the buckle. So it does not feature a quick adjust. You still need a spring bar tool. I believe they call it a quick adjust here, or maybe it's just called micro adjustments. But you could switch it out if you're in between link sizes, which is nice to have. The watch does sit very nicely on wrists above 7 inches. The lug nuts taper down nicely and gradually, and they don't overhang at all. Both watches feature screwed in end links. And it looks like the Omega screws are finished a little bit nicer. I've never had luck trying to get one of these tiny screws out. Maybe I'm just afraid of stripping it, but I've always gone to an AD to have my watch sized, even though it's not often that I have to have them sized. Now we have both watches on rubber straps, which really complements both watches nicely, being that they're dive watches. But I gotta say, it's gonna be hard to beat the Omega's finishing on the rubber strap. The Omega is lighter, softer, and just feels very nice, but it's also 3 times the price just for the rubber. I must say that I do love Breitling's clasp on the rubber strap. It is very nice, a lot better in my opinion and cleaner, since you see no sizing holes and you have this quick adjust like the bracelet does on the Omega. However, unlike the Omega, you can size down the strap while wearing the watch. You don't need to push the button to get it to adjust. You simply just push down on the end that needs to go in and it'll close. Unfortunately, there's no quick adjust on the Omega, but it's not too bad to change it. Just a couple more seconds. What I really like about the Breitling one, like I mentioned, you don't see the sizing holes. So unless you're sharing this watch with somebody else, it's pretty nice to have the cut down leather straps with no sizing holes on them. So the Omega is more supple and forgiving. It moves a lot easier, and it's also more lightweight. And it does this all without feeling cheap, which is what's really impressive. Now these rubber straps are cut to size. I love how tightly finished the rubber strap on the Omega is, where there's no gap of light in between the dial and the strap. I'm going to shamelessly introduce two more categories, which are basically freebies for the Omega. And that is packaging. The Omega blows the Breitling packaging out of the water. The box is very well made, and you can see an unboxing video for both of these watches if you click up here on the right corner. The last category is brand perception. Who cares, right? But I think a blue Seamaster is definitely a super classic watch that's going to continue to age timelessly. Thank you for watching. Congratulations to our new light heavyweight champion of the world, the Omega Seamaster 300M Professional.